Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14. I am joined here by Ayanda Nyathi. Ayanda is a news anchor and journalist and a familiar face and familiar voice, I'm sure. By the time that you hear him, if you're listening to the podcast or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you probably already recognize his face from the many DSTV channels that he has been on. It is certainly a privilege to have Ayanda here. We are going to chat about a whole bunch of whole ranging topics, and I hope that you enjoy the show. There are various platforms that the show is available on the YouTube channel. The video is available as well as on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts and Google Podcasts. We also have a website that's impactfulconversations.co.za for you to get to know everything about the show. But do subscribe to any one of your favorite platforms or to them all if you feel like it. But let's get cracking. Ayanda, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Tafa. Finally, we get to catch up.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to take one of your many innovations for us to get here. Since you're forever busy, I struggle to find time. So, what a good way to also, I guess, have a catch up between old friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for agreeing to be part of the show. I know we spoke about this probably about a month ago or so.
Yeah.
To really have a go at doing this episode. And I think, I'm really excited about what we're gonna dive into. And it's also a great excuse for the two of us to catch up. Ayanda, just to start off, I obviously know you very well. A lot of people know your face, know your voice, but you know, kick us off just with a general Q&A. Tell us about, where you're from, what did you study, and what are you passionate about?
Sure. Okay. So all I know is Johannesburg. For the longest time, I think my immediate memory, my more distant memory is got the streets of Alex, which is where I grew up, and more broadly, I guess the streets of Johannesburg, as I went through school and stuff like that. So that's pretty much my life, man. Like I've been around the city for as long as I can remember, except the point where I needed to go to university, which, as you know, was at
Mm.
UCT. And if you had told me how much was going to change from that moment, I would have laughed you right off and gone the opposite direction because what happened in the very short space of time at UCT, I think, set me up for everything else that's currently even happening now.
Mm.
Um, and I guess that's kind of typical, isn't it? Right? When you finally leave the nest and try to figure things out on your own. Those of us who walk that journey in a more genuine way or in as open a way as we can typically come back very different people. And I was not spared that process. And I guess that kind of feeds into the second part of your question. That's what I'm passionate about, being as honest and genuine as you can as you walk this life journey thing and seeing where it takes you. And that for me has, I guess, put me in great positions, but also put me in very scary positions because once you reckon with that, you have to
Mm.
make decisions that sometimes don't have an immediate outcome, especially an outcome that you'd be comfortable with. And I know we'll get into that in just a moment.
We'll dive into that, but I must say you have lived that passion, and I
Yeah.
think it really has been inspiring to watch that, and I think a massive privilege to watch that up close. But we'll take people on that journey with us in a few moments. But
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about your studies, right? So let's first start off. I want to start off with school.
Yeah.
And you and I actually went to the same high school. That's where we met. um i I really just want to get an understanding. So for a lot of people who don't know, you actually were a deputy head prefect of a private school in South Africa, right? But I
Are
want to
we
get
are we gonna out you? Or are we just gonna keep this about me? I'll mention in the comments section.
all I'll say is we work together, right?
Right.
That's all I'll
Very
say.
closely.
We work together very closely, right? But I want to get an understanding. So that's obviously the one of your many achievements that you achieved during your time at school. um and matric matric ended up being sort of the pinnacle of your time at school. If we think of it, as a journey up a mountain, for example, I want to understand when you're at the bottom of the mountain, grade 8, young Ayanda Nyathi, was that vision a reality of where you'd be? And I'm not just talking about deputy prefect. I'm talking about being excellent academically. I'm talking about being an excellent singer. I'm talking about being an all-round inspiration to a school of more than 700 kids, right? And the broadest college as a whole as well, of more than 2,000 kids as well. Bottom of the mountain, grade 8. Was that a reality for you?
Gee, I should probably start by saying when I got to the school we went to, it was such a culture shock. It was a completely different world. I didn't even know where the school was. And I guess for context, it's because I got a scholarship there. And before then, I couldn't even pronounce the name of the school,
Yeah.
let alone pinpoint it on a map and I guess place it in the greater context of where the quality of education is insofar as
It
the rest of the
it is
country's education
a
system.
difficult name to pronounce, must say. Like it's
Yeah,
really
yeah. Now
I was
everyone's gonna wonder what school is this? But anyway, and I think that's important to point out, it was a different world. Like I had to get into that and try figure out what matters in this world, what people care about, whether or not there's time for the things I used to think mattered before coming into that environment. And I think that was my biggest challenge, navigating this Narnia, right? Where there's different superpowers and people get about this life thing very differently.
Mm,
And because of that, I did not even in the slightest of ways think I'd even be remembered by the time we got to matric. It was
mm,
a matter of actually getting there and trying to survive this
yeah.
very, very different environment. It's a good private school. A lot of people that go there are very well off. And I come from Alex, I caught a taxi to get there.
Mm.
Um, and even when you get to the gate, you realize you need a car to get to the classroom because it's such a different world.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and so a lot of my time at the bottom of the mountain, so to speak, was trying to get a sense of how on earth I'm going to get to the top. And by get to the top, I mean how on earth I'm going to finish more than anything else. But still, even then, most of us, if not all, have dreams and aspirations. And I was no different from that. And so I guess in hindsight, I now see that I started working on those dreams without even knowing.
Yeah.
And that's probably closely tied to how I grew up, closely tied to people who had surrounded me all my life and the ways through which they, I guess, dealt with their difficulties. You just
Mm.
get on with it. And hopefully, at the end of the entire process, you yield the results you were hoping for. And I'd never imagined that I'd get to matric with what I got with there. Not a chance. Even today, I'm just like, what on earth happened? How?
But I
But of course, very grateful that it happened.
it's so important, I think, that what you said, that you almost consciously or subconsciously rather, started working on, the dreams to get to the top of the mountain. But consciously you just wanted to finish, right? You just wanted to get there. You could see the top, but you just were like, okay, as long as I can walk out, with my matric. And I think it's a really powerful story of how came from literally the bottom of the mountain to get to the pinnacle, how you did that, but also who you became at the end of that as well. I think, the person that you realize that you were within that as well, I think has probably, been a really powerful example for so many. And I've spoken to a lot of people who, can have really just said to me that you were a powerful example for them because you, and people from all different types of backgrounds, right? It's that sort of looking at somebody who has, walked the journey, walked the trail, and really started to realize who they were throughout that journey and throughout that experience. So talk to me about two or three challenges that you had, you know, within that process of getting to the top of the mountain, and how you think that also changed you as a person positively.
Mm, mm. I think what comes top of mind now is thinking whether or not I'm cut out for this. I think I had to deal with that a lot.
Mm.
Because again, you realize that a lot of people who had gotten to that place had such incredible support, and that sort of wove into who they became. And it almost felt like people had these innate tools to be able to get through um, that schooling system, which I didn't have. So I had to, for a lot of the time, kind of psych myself up to be like, no, like yeah, very different starts, but you've also got those innate tools to get through this, which isn't easy when you have to do it, on your own in some respects. So that was the one thing. The other thing was getting plugged into the social life. Uh, yeah, no, people live different, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I couldn't relate for a very long time. I think, yeah, for a very long time, it was a matter of gee, how you have fun and my idea of fun are very different. But also, how you're able to have that kind of fun is so closely tied to the access you have that even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to take part in that.
Yeah.
And so, socially, I had to, again, subconsciously create my own beehive, so to speak, where I surround myself with people who are either understanding enough or people who can relate to the call it the disjuncture that I was going through, the disconnect that I had to experience. So socially, that was also quite difficult. And I think for the most part, also trying to make the most of what was obviously a big opportunity. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, when you know how much you've been given and you just
Mm.
don't want to mess it up. For the most part, you just like, I gotta have something to show for this at the end of the day. And luckily, we were too young to really like grasp the magnitude of the opportunities we've been given. But I had a concept of that, I had like a slight understanding that not everybody is able to be at a school like this. Not everybody is able to go through the type of exposure that we go through. And because of that, it almost feels like you better have something to show for it, because it's that unique. And so, yeah, I mean, just at the top of my head, I'd say those were the three big things. Am I good enough for this? Socially, what the hell is happening here? And make this count, make this work as much as you can. And I think, yeah, again, in hindsight, luckily, we've been able to do those things satisfactorily at the very least.
Mm. Mm. That's really powerful. Let's so you're at the top of one mountain, right? You're in matric. Time now to climb the next one.
Yeah.
Um, it's time now to go to university. You you go and want to study chemical engineering, um, and in fact, you go and you study chemical engineering. Not only study it, you quite frankly do very well in chemical engineering, right? Um, in tutorials, people come to you to ask,
Wow.
I was coming to you as well, right?
No, I think I was coming more to you most of the time, but
Maybe
we'll
we would just
take it.
find each other in the middle in our confusion. It's like, but then you decide, you know what, this is not for me, um, and you make a switch, right? That not a lot of people, I think, would have expected you to make. I think those who were close to you might have expected it, or might have wanted you even to have made that switch immediately from the start. But take us on the journey of from matric, why Chemeng, right? Why go to Chemeng? Um, the factors that played into that, and then also the switch to film and media. So why then that switch, and why then, and how was that process as well?
Mm. So, I think in hindsight, knowing what I knew then, I still would have done chemical engineering. That was a genuine conviction I had at the time.
Yeah.
and what went into that. Typically, and you'll be able to relate to this, I know. When you appear to have certain academic capabilities, there's always a presumption that there's a specific trajectory you need to follow.
Mm.
So, okay, great. I could do the maths, I could do the accounting, I could do the physics, but I could also do the drama, and I could also do the music, you know? And so at the time, it almost felt like there was a right answer to give to this big question, what next? And honestly, with all the consultations I had and with all the, I guess, reading up I was able to do at the time, I genuinely thought that I should probably go ahead and do this thing called chemical engineering. It's chemistry. How bad could it get? I mean, come on. It's just, little did we know.
Test one.
you know? Um, but, at the start of our conversation, I said that, one of the things I really value is being genuine. And it took me one term of doing chemical engineering, even though we were getting through the test while, I mean, especially the maths for me still came quite naturally. I could do all that stuff. But I, for a moment, sat back and imagined 10, 15 years from where I was then and whether I'd still want to carry on doing chemical engineering. And I think the answer for me became very clear that I didn't. I just, this wasn't giving me my kicks. It wasn't fulfilling my spirit, and it wasn't igniting, I think, that thing in all of us that we have, which is the desire to keep going, the desire to want to find out more, the desire to keep searching and finding the answers that people before us had been asking for years, which is what is the purpose of all of this? Um, and that is when I started having to reckon with that very scary prospect for many of us who did well in school, which is, oh my gosh, I think I got this wrong, you know.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, that I think was a point where of great turbulence at the time. Like you said, I mean, part of the pitfalls of being visible is that everyone's watching your every move. And
Yeah.
there had been like a song and dance about me going to UCT, doing this chemical engineering thing. Here's this guy with all these distinctions, and this is his story. Oh my gosh, step aside, Barack Obama.
It was in
And
December. It was actually in the newspaper. Like
yeah,
that's
that's the thing.
it was on the Sunday Times. Like it was there. So,
And so now imagine if at the time your 18-year-old mind is thinking, gee, there's a whole article about this, and now you want to change the script?
mm,
Boy, sit down.
mm,
Um,
mm.
but eventually I realized I had to. I had to. If not for me, then for the many people who I know are rooting for me, who would want me to, at the very least, be happy. And that's when I was like, okay, cool. I've consulted the National Command Council of my life. And this is how we move forward.
Mm.
And yeah, as you know, after the first year of chemical engineering, passed all my courses really well, actually. And I
Good.
decided that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to do what I think I've always wanted to do, which, thank God, is what I'm doing now.
Mm. So link for me that switch um to your purpose. So link it for me to what you at the time thought, but actually my purpose in life is to do this, and hence this is why I'm walking away from this and walking towards that.
Mm. I'll be very honest with you. I still don't think I've figured out exactly what my purpose is. That's probably, a lifetime's worth of work,
Yeah.
for me at least. But there are small signs that speak to you. At the time of when I was deciding whether or not this is what I wanted to do, the switch that is, I spoke to a lot of people who I felt knew me really well. And I'll never forget one of those engagements was with my music teacher, who all she said to me was, listen to that very silent voice, right? And I think as soon as she said it, I knew exactly what she was talking about. You know, that very still, not overbearing, very easy to ignore whisper almost inside of you, your heart, your mind, wherever. Um, and even that voice won't give you the answer, but it'll nudge you in the right direction. And I think that for me is what made the difference. Once I got that advice, it all clicked that, okay, there's always been that thing that gnaws at you, almost like a tap that's dripping, just one drop a day, but
Mm.
it's dripping, and eventually you're going to be forced to pay attention to that consistent drip. Um, and that for me, yeah, is when I knew for sure that, okay, this is a decision that can no longer be ignored or delayed, and one that I had to take now. But I think it's also important to point out that even then, you're not sure. Even
Yeah.
then, it's not like this clear burning fire in the bush Moses vibes. There are still so many things that are up in the air that it's enough for you to cower back into the very comfort position of having a whole lot more certainties than, moving out of that comfort zone. So even when I decided, I had no idea what was coming next. But again, that thing is what she called it.
Yeah.
For me, was enough to finally make that decision. As to whether it's linked completely to my passion, I think that still remains to be seen. What my purpose is, I think remains to be defined. But again, I think we need to walk through all of these processes in as genuine and open a way as possible and seeing where the universe takes us, which
Yeah.
is what I aim to do, at least at the very least.
Mm. Mm. That's really powerful. So, if I had to say to you, what would you say to two people? Um, Person A is the matriculant, right? Who's not too sure what they want to do next year in 2021. Um, and obviously, given that it's a pandemic as well,
Yeah, it's got other problems.
salt to to the mix already. Um, and person B, who is actually the first year varsity student, who did sign up for something, is doing okay at it, but has realized, Ayanda, this is not it. What would you say to individually to those two people? So person one is the matriculant who's not too sure what they want to do next year, um, and not too sure which direction to go, and they have various options to take, and person B is the first year varsity student who says, actually, I'm not so sure I actually did the right thing here.
Yeah.
Not what I like.
Mm. I think I'm going to give one answer to both scenarios, both people.
Mm.
And that is, if you make decisions based on what you know with no ulterior motives and are as open to yourself as possible, I think you'll land up where you're meant to be. So don't stress about it.
Mm.
That's important because if you're consistently open to the process and you allow yourself to trust the process, your decisions will keep changing. But I think what we are afraid of the most is this the right decision right now? And will this take me directly to where I need to be? And nobody knows those answers. They mustn't lie to you. Even me, I don't know those answers. Having it gone through the
Oh,
most. We
yeah.
just, we don't. But I'm a firm believer in the concept of you landing up where you need to be when you walk this journey honestly.
Mm.
And I think that for me will just be the very simple, I guess, insight. And I'm just taking it from my own experience. And it's actually, to be very honest with you, advice I got from somebody else who I had spoken to, who said, what if, let's just say, what if whatever you decide doesn't really matter? As long as you're being honest, you'll end up where you need to be. So make a decision. Make a decision, see what happens, and be open to constantly reviewing those decisions
Mm.
and allowing that thing that I mentioned to continuously nudge you in the right direction.
That's pretty powerful. That's, I mean, just as you're talking there, I'm thinking, what? I think what makes decisions really difficult is we feel the pressure to make the right one,
Yeah.
right? And we almost think it's this fork in the road. So we almost think it's like this thing of like, okay, if I decide to go study accounting, I can't be a doctor anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's like that's it. Like I'm now an accountant. Like I'm now 65, retired accountant. It's like so it's we almost feel this. At least I can definitely say I felt that pressure where it's like, okay, if I decide to go do this, that's it. Like that's my
Mm.
life. Like that. Like it's done. Whereas I think you're quite right in the sense that actually you're also allowed to say, sometime in, be honest with yourself, as you said again, be honest with yourself and say, actually, am I enjoying this? If I'm not, it's okay. You can at least take steps to try and change, to take another path, to take another direction. So I think that's really important what you said there, and I think how you've sort of drawn out those principles of being honest with yourself, I think is really really profound. But let's calm it down a little bit. Okay, we started off really intense. we, we
It's
just
you,
went.
Tapa. It's you.
That's my fault, right? But calm it down a little bit. You know, people are probably wondering who is this Ayanda guy, right? By now, if they're this part of the way through the podcast or the YouTube video, who is this guy? This guy is very interesting. But let's get to know you a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about your daily routine,
Yeah.
particularly now in COVID-19, and at the time of recording, South Africa is within level 3 lockdown or advanced level 3 lockdown rather. Which is a very interesting term.
Yeah.
Um, we our cases are rising. Gauteng is rising at 5,000 plus cases per day. South Africa is rising at 13,300 cases. I think last night 394 at the time of recording. Right now, take me through and we'll come to being in media in the time of COVID-19. That we will come to a little bit later. But I just want to get to know, what's a day in Ayanda Nyathi's life like? Is it calm? Is it frantic? Is it always hectic? Do you actually get time to relax in throughout the day? Take us through, what's your daily routine?
So I think it's important to say at first that the days are never the same. And that's probably why I was never going to survive Chem-Eng. Um, I was
Yeah.
just, yeah, like literally sometimes the hours aren't the same. And that's probably how I'm also wired. I really appreciate how things change insofar that's concerned. But to answer you directly, I'm up every morning before 3 o'clock, every weekday at least.
Mm.
And that typically involves me reevaluating my decisions the first 10 minutes because I'm thinking, how? How did you say yes to this?
Some people are going to sleep at 3.
Yes, yes. And that's because, obviously I need to be at work, ready, knowing what the big stories are, knowing what to tell you by the time you switch on your TV at 6 o'clock. So that takes an incredible amount of work. We need to be up and ready hours before. By the time you have your first cup of coffee, we're on cup number 3, so that we can make sure that, your time is well spent. And so it takes a lot uh, out of you, such that by the time you get to Friday, you really are spent. Um, but yeah, it'll be a 3 o'clock wake up call. In studio, ready to go live by 6, and go through the show, and it really flies by considering just how much happens in South Africa and the rest of the world. And you touch on the issue of the pandemic that has changed so much of how we work. From very practical issues such as us having to do all our interviews online via Skype or Zoom or any other form, to things that perhaps are not notable, and such as the impact that it has even on our psyche. For the most part, people who work in news are perceived to be like the machines through which we project the messages we send out. And we obviously we far from that. For instance, I've got colleagues who have very close family members heavily affected by COVID. Um, but in many respects, they need to show up for work and make sure that they're composed in order to, you know, guide whoever's watching through this very, very wild time of our lives. And so there's that, we are not exempt from the issues about which we report. And sometimes it's easy to forget that. And so typically my day is like the day of many other South Africans, especially during these times. You're navigating the world hoping you don't come into contact with someone who is positive, and if so, hoping that if you do contract the virus yourself, you'll be fine. Hoping that you don't put your loved ones in danger if that does happen, um, et cetera, et cetera. You get worried about the petrol price and all those different things. And so my day, insofar as that is concerned, is no different. But typically, after I wrap up the show at Newsroom Africa, I've got about an hour or so to head to 702, where I'd get into that process again, trying to figure out what the big stories are. And my role at 702, or at EWN to be more accurate, actually, is dual. There are days where I'll be on the desk, and there are days where I'll be on the field as a reporter. And again, there's no telling which will come next, depending on the needs of the newsroom and what's happening in the news cycle. So uh, I really mean it. My days are never the same, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I must say every time. So I also I'm typically up quite early as well, and so my work day probably starts at about 6:30. But by the time I sort of go through my Twitter feed just before 7, the first thing I see is a little clip of you walking walking to say good morning to people on the news. And I must say, it really does bring me like to smile every time. So thank you for waking up early, and thank you for the service that you
Thank you for walking. That
did.
walk has gotten
Yeah, that
more
walk.
attention, I think,
Oh,
than anything else I would have expected.
it got into. I saw you were trending a little bit because of that walk. Tell me about a little bit about the walk.
It's just a walk, guys. Like,
No,
I don't
I,
even.
it's very. There's a signature to it. I don't know what. Like, because on a video preview, you don't see the full. Sometimes you don't see the full
Yeah.
um picture. So on the one, like I just saw from your knees down, and I saw someone walk. I was like, that's Ayanda. Like it's something. I love the walk. It's got an energy to it. I don't know. It's just got this like.
I want to take the credit, but I really can't. That was a decision from the creative minds behind the show. People who had that vision, they were like, look, at 6 o'clock, you're going to walk from there to the table,
Yeah,
say good morning, and get us going.
yeah.
Um, if I had known this was going to be the response, I would have been much more enthusiastic than I was when I agreed to it. But here we are.
That's hilarious. Okay, so let's dive a little bit into about your career as a news anchor and journalist, and as a news presenter and journalist as well. I really want to dive into the sort of common misconceptions that people have about your profession, and I think you touched on one of them um, in a slightly earlier on when you were talking about your daily routine. Um, when you said that people think that, like, okay, cool, if I wake up at 6 o'clock, I see Ayanda doing the walk. That's like, Ayanda's just got into the office and he's just woken up. Maybe, I don't know, he maybe caught up on the day's news on Twitter while he was on his way to work or something. I don't know, right? Or listened to like the breaking news while he was driving or whatever. I think you've touched on a little bit about that misconception that we all think that like that just happens, that like you just present the news, it just comes to you.
Yeah.
But I really want to dive into, what are the common misconceptions that, people like myself who are not in the industry um, make about, the things that you actually do and the life, of a news presenter and of a journalist in general.
Mm. Yeah, I think I've already touched on one of those, and that's the fact that we're immune from the stories about which we report. I've got colleagues who get deeply moved by some of the stories they have to report on. Sadly, we live in a country where things like femicides, for instance, are quite common, and we have a few people in the industry who are women, and in many respects, they have to dig really deep to try and bring the story, give it, the kind of delicacy and respect and integrity the story deserves. But even after that, even after acing that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not affected by it. And so I think it's a point that's been made before, but I think one worth rehashing. We are in the world about which we report. And because of that, we are also moving with the ebbs and flows of that world. Um, but the other thing is also what you've touched on. I am in awe when I think of just how hard some of my colleagues work, the incredible amount of preparation, the sheer intelligence, the heart that goes into putting some of those stories together. It really, especially on TV, it takes a village. But I think on radio as well, it takes a village for us to put together a decent, good few minutes of news that makes sense. Because when it comes to us, it's not necessarily always coherent. But by the time you hear or listen to it, it's been cleaned up, it's been placed in a way such that it'll make sense to you and will give you an idea of why it matters. Um, but yeah, I'd say those for now at least are the two big things that come to my head. We're not exempt, and what goes on air has probably been mulled over for a good few moments before you've come into contact with it. But I think the other misconception sometimes, and I don't know, some people in our industry might be afraid to admit this, but we don't know everything. I'll admit it. We
Mm.
don't. There's no way, we are mere mortals. And sometimes it almost feels like there's that pressure to be an expert on every news item that makes it onto the headlines. Um, and that would, I think, take away from the very real human engagement or human connection that we make with our audiences, right? Because sometimes we are taken aback, and it's that very surprise that helps a Tafa relate to an Ayanda.
Yep.
Because when Ayanda's shocked at this news item, Tafa's like, right?
Mm.
This is out of this world. And already as human beings, we are together, I guess, making sense of our world. And that's what I think at least protects anchors, journalists from being replaced by some kind of machine, because a machine won't do that. But the backside of that is the fact that we sometimes learn with you, and that's okay, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah. I think that's really insightful. Um, I think especially, about that sort of emotional aspect of it, which we all come to. I think I want to touch on that in a bit, where we talk about, what it's like currently and in today's time. But I want to, specifically to you now, how are you finding it as a young professional,
Yeah,
um, who's also trying to, build your brand, build your own career, relatively to people in business, to people in that field as well. You are very young,
yeah,
um, and to have got to where you got to, it really is, um, excellent. To have, to just have got to where you got to immediately right now, before we even go any further, right? Already, like, at your stage in your career, that is incredibly impressive. I want to know, do you ever feel pressure to perform? And if you do, how do you deal with that? With all of this that's also around you in terms of, you're also trying to build your your brand as Ayanda. You're also trying to you also know that you are very young for where you
Yeah.
are. I really sort of want to backdrop it against that, but I also want to understand, do you feel pressure to perform? And if you do, how do you practically deal with that?
Mm. I feel pressure all the time, but I think it's also worth mentioning that it's not unique.
Yeah,
Um, no matter how long you've been at this, no matter which industry you're in, if you take what you do seriously, I think you'll feel the pressure, and it's probably something you can speak to as well. Um, and the the idea of still being younger than a lot of people in the industry is one I think that doesn't come to the fore as much, and that's because of the amount of support I have. So I'm surrounded by people who are consistently checking on to see if I'm okay, whether I'm on air or not. I've seldom felt like I've been completely thrown and left in the lurch, without a way to navigate what to do next. Um, and I've also, from the very start, come to terms with aspects of this journey where I will have shortcomings. I think that for me is what's helped me through moments where, I have come out short. And there's definitely been those moments, and I have no doubt that there'll be plenty others in the
yeah,
near future. So once you've come to terms with that, it's much easier to deal with the pressure,
mm,
accepting that you too are learning. And I guess as time goes on, you will make sure that you don't make the same mistakes, even
yeah,
though you'll keep making mistakes. I don't know
yeah,
if that makes sense. Um, and it's the concept of falling forward. If it goes wrong, acknowledge it's gone wrong, learn from it, and don't let it go wrong for the same reasons again. And that's been my motto. That's been how I've gone through this. But I guess it's also kind of laced in the appreciation that everybody started somewhere, and eventually you have to start so that you can be the people that you've always looked up to, who've done this for so long and who continue to do it so well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if I had to ask you, what are three words that people, or three phrases that people that immediately come to mind when people hear the name Ayanda Nyathi? So what are the three? I mean, the walk is definitely one, but let's
No.
definitely a more recent one. But let's park that one across. What do you think are three phrases, or at least that you are working for people to associate with you? Um,
Oh, okay. But that's a
as
very
you,
different question.
yeah. So as you let me actually rather ask that question as opposed to
Yeah.
what are people saying. I think I'm more asking about what is your intention, in terms of the brand that you're building as a person and as a professional.
Mm,
What are those three phrases that you are working towards for people to associate with you?
yeah. I think like many journalists, it's credible, reliable, and I guess relatable. I think, yeah, those would be my actual three words. And that's much harder to do than people would imagine. It takes a while before anybody will trust you with
Mm,
their world, which is
yeah,
what essentially being in the news business is about.
mm,
Um,
mm,
enabling people to hear you and not question what you're saying because you've done this for long enough and well enough for them to know that what you're saying is probably true.
yeah,
Um, and I think, yeah, generally that's what newsrooms across the world are constantly striving for. And I'm no different from that. I don't think I'm exempt from that dream that
yeah.
at
I
some
I,
stage.
I have seen of the relatable part. That's really. Sure. Yeah, that's really, I like that.
You can relate.
I really like that. So, okay, a couple of questions or a few questions from our listeners. Some of them I've already sort of asked you already and weave those through, but
Sure.
um, let's touch on a few at the moment. So, um, you know, something I always tell guests of the show is that the listeners ask great questions. They they often questions as I see it pop up on my phone. I'm like, ooh, okay, that's I don't even know how I would answer that,
Yeah.
right? So they ask really amazing questions. So, but so the first one which I'd like you to answer is, so are there any news items that for you have provoked your prior beliefs, in within your reporting or your writing?
Um, I've luckily my when I was at UCT, I think I went through an important phase, for lack of a better term, of reckoning with the fact that you won't always have the answers. And I'll tell you why I mentioned that now. A lot of the time, people are taken aback, have their beliefs rocked by certain stories when they had previously thought that they had figured it all out. And I have never been in that position. I've always known that, even though I, for instance, believe in the Holy Trinity, there's going to be an instance where a compelling argument is made against why that belief, at the very least, is shaky, you
Yeah.
know? And because of that, I'm trying to think very hard of a moment where I was taken aback. I can think of many moments, though, where I was compelled, many moments where I was like, wow, this is well thought through, and I'm glad I had this discussion. And that ranges from things to do with the economy to issues like I've alluded to, relating to faith. And because I think of that process while I was still in varsity, that reckoning that sure, there's a whole world out there with all kinds of possibilities. I've never really been shook, so to speak. That's the term on the Twitter streets. I've never I've never been overly shook by the stories I do.
Mm, mm. And the second question is, so it's related to that. Uh, where do you draw the line between your personal beliefs, right, and how you also present something without bias? So how do you sort of manage that as well?
So I think what is really exciting, especially in South African media, is that there's a raging debate around that, right? This idea that we need to present newsmen and women or news people as these objective beings that exist in silos and are not affected by the world. And slowly, I think we're moving towards a very real acknowledgement that we are going to feel some type of way about some stories. And sometimes it comes across, even in the line of questioning, that many people who are even way more experienced than I am, that they take. You can almost see when, okay, I don't want to mention names, but when someone is annoyed or irritated before the interview starts,
Mhm.
and you kind of get a sense that okay, this is where this one is going with this one. And yeah, slowly we are starting to be okay with that because I think it drives home the point I'd made earlier, which is the fact that we are humans in the world about which we report. And of course, we're going to be moved in certain directions by those stories. And it's becoming, I think the relationship we have with that reality is becoming much healthier,
Yeah.
because yeah, we're being more open about that. Some people are going to be incredibly upset
Yeah.
that there are regulations against, same-sex marriage. Some people are going to be very upset that, um, you know, people in a factory in the Eastern Cape haven't been paid for years. And some people are going to be very upset that the Chief Justice is speaking in a way that paints Israel in a particular way, you know? And slowly we are being okay with that. And I think I'm also luckily entering the industry whilst that conversation is taking place. So I've never really had to worry about being upset, because of a certain topic. What is my responsibility, though, is to ensure that the people I disagree with are given as much time and empowerment to make their point, and leaving it up to you as a viewer or listener to decide where you stand. So, sure, I might not agree with the guest. I can allow that to come through in our discussion, but I mustn't allow that to empower and take over that discussion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I'm very lucky that, we're entering the world with that conversation currently taking place.
It's a really important point, right? About, you you as someone who is, bringing us the news, you're also a human, right? So you also have your views and your opinions. But
Yeah.
we as the viewers sometimes don't see it that way. We almost think you should just churn it out, like like you should just tell us what it is. But in reality, it's a bit more, complex than that. So let's come to being in the news in the time of COVID-19, right? So I can imagine, just like any other industry, this has really changed the way that you work. Instead of guests coming into the studio and having that face-to-face contact, you are now doing recordings like we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
Virtually. This is now the norm for everybody. But I want to understand first, before that, this must be quite emotionally taxing for you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
The way everybody, I think, should, which is to lean on your support structure.
Mm.
Um, and again, I'm very fortunate to have support in my professional life and in my personal life, and you constantly lean on that. Whilst also, I guess, realizing sometimes that people might lean on you. So sometimes, now and again, in the newsroom, you're expected to go a bit further than you typically would because a colleague is going through something, or you are expected to show up in ways that you wouldn't because the people who usually do that aren't able to.
Mm.
And luckily, when you are in a position where you aren't necessarily able to quote unquote pull your weight, other people step into the breach and do that for you. And I can't imagine a situation where you deal with these issues in any other way. It's such unprecedented times. We're constantly in shock, living with heightened levels of anxiety. Um, that I think that humanity that got us here is what's going to get us through this moment too, which is to constantly be there for each other. And yeah, luckily, I'm in work environments where there's an appreciation of that. It's not always just about the work. Quite often, in fact, just yesterday, I had one of my managers pull me aside and just ask, "How are you doing? How's everything?" And it's that off air, off screen time that makes the difference. So that when you are on air, you able to continue doing what you're doing.
Mm. And so, do you ever get a chance to take breaks? I mean, do you ever, what sort of daily habits do you have?
What's that? No, I'm joking.
that, that word is not in your vocabulary.
No, you
I
do.
what what daily habits do you have in place, the checks and balances, to make
Yeah.
sure actually mentally and emotionally you're in check and you're okay, as you sort of go through this? Because invariably it's almost like a centrifuge, right? It's like, you once you're in, like, you're spinning. It's like,
Mm.
oh, like, every hour there's something new, something's happened, and you constantly have to get ready for that, and emotionally ready for that, and emotionally ready to bring it to us as the viewers, right? And for us to digest that, right? What daily habits do you have in place, to sort of keep yourself in check in that respect?
Yeah. I'm a big classical music fan.
Mm.
Um, and why I mention that is because now and again you just need to switch off, which is what many people in the industry struggle with, right? So for me, I don't have to be at work to be working, if that makes sense, you know?
Yes.
Um, because there's news all around us, you know, there's news on the radio, there's news on TV, etc.,
Mm.
etc. And so I think most of us need to guard against that, especially, you know, a doctor, when they're done being in the theater, they're not going to operate on someone during dinner. But a journalist can very easily still be dealing with journalistic stuff on Twitter, on Facebook, even at home. And so, what I try to guard against every day is having that downtime where you just completely switch off. Where if you ask me what's the top story, I have no idea. I don't know. You tell me. Because I just gotta take some time out, even if it is for a moment. And because there's so much happening, sometimes that's all you can afford. Just that moment. On really bad days, it's like on my drive back home. That's the
Yeah.
only time I'll have downtime. But as soon as I get to the house, again, you get back into engaging with what's happening in the world, etc., etc. Um, but what I also find sometimes works is having friends in the industry where you guys can speak about what it is you're struggling with and that relatability, people who can almost finish your sentences helps.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's how we're dealing, yeah.
What is the new normal like?
Oh,
For you practically in the industry. Um, what is it actually? What has practically changed now compared to how it was, previously pre COVID-19?
sure. First of all, the new normal hasn't been discovered yet. I
Yeah.
haven't found anybody who's been honest enough to say that. We have no idea what the new normal is looking like. When you figure it out, you tell us. But
Mm.
obviously, there are visible changes. For one, I think you'll walk into any newsroom in South Africa and probably in the world, and you'll find it's much emptier than what it used to be. And I think what that suggests is that we're going to move into a space where newsrooms are occupying much fewer space than they used to. Because we're learning now that, we can still continue doing what we're doing, literally scattered all over the place, you know?
Mm.
At first there used to be this concept, and I think it's probably the same in mining, which is where you're in. At first there used to be this concept that everybody needs to be together, kumbaya, make tea in the kitchen, like high
Yeah.
five each other and do all these great things before getting into work. But now we're realizing, hold on, at least half of you can be at home and we'll
Mm.
still be able to do what we're doing. And I think that's the most notable change that's currently happening. And I think because it's happening so quickly and so well, it's probably going to be one of the many things that are going to be retained post COVID-19, whenever that is, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, But insofar as everything else, I think it's still in the works. We need to be very honest about that. We still very much also scratching our heads and asking questions about where on earth is this going? So yeah.
We're all just kind of figuring it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think so.
Lastly, um, I really want to give a bit of a slot to for you to give a piece of advice that you would have, for particularly, I think, a young, aspiring individual, who's at the start of their career, um, initially, you know, sort of in that step of, is sort of starting out in the workplace, or if they're a teacher, they're in the schools, if they're a lecturer, they're in the universities. But a young person who's starting out, just like you and I did, just over a year and a bit ago, sort of full time in their career. What piece of advice would you give to that person?
Sure. I think for me, I'm gonna share what was shared with me.
Mm.
Ask as many questions as you can and be willing to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah.
I think that's what's helped me in my trajectory. Um, If you're lucky enough to do what you love, do it. Because I think that's the part we didn't touch on. Some people can't for a whole host of reasons. But if you're lucky enough to do what you're passionate about, go ahead and do it. But even then, that's actually where the work starts, you know? So be inquisitive, you know, ask as much as I still ask, you know, in many respects approach things wondering more than anything else. Um, and then be willing to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do because that's where it all begins, you know. My first interaction or my first kind of stint in broadcasting was a smallanyana role at 2 a.m. on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Now, I am young and happening, right? 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I need to be on the streets.
Yeah.
I need to be within the people. But I was like, you know what? It's cool. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do this because I know nobody else wants to do it, and that's where you carve out, you know, all the stuff you need to. And what people don't tell you is that's where you are in a space to make your mistakes in peace, you know, and really learn from them, so that at a time where it's no longer just 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, it's now 7 a.m. on a weekday. You
Mm.
hopefully have learned enough to do what you need to do because of course a whole lot more is at stake. So yeah, those are the two things: ask questions, be inquisitive, wonder more than anything else, and don't be afraid to do the stuff nobody else wants to do.
Yeah. Sure. Really, really insightful words there. I think it's still relevant no matter what stage of the career you're at, right?
100%. 100%.
So, Ayanda, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to be on the show. Um, I think you have shared some really insightful words with us. I think the power of your story, I think the way you've been able to draw out the lessons from that has really been impactful. You know, even for me who knows about all of this, right? I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, like sure, that's really um, that's just incredibly inspirational, and I think you always have been incredibly inspirational. I want to thank you for sharing those lessons that you have gleaned along the way in the journey of life. And I want to thank you for being a part of the community and the Impactful Conversations community, and for sharing, your lessons, your challenges, your perceptions with us. Ultimately to achieve the goal of this platform, which is to educate and inspire. So, thank you very much for coming onto the show. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I think it's been a trip down memory lane for a
Yeah.
bit, and which has been awesome as well, right? Because I think we hardly ever get that time
Mm.
to do that as well, to actually sort of reflect. And I know at the beginning of the chat off air, we discussed about the fact that it is going to be quite a reflective, episode as well. So I just want to thank you, and I just want to say, I really appreciate this chat, but also really appreciate the excuse that we had to catch up as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a great moment for me to also remember how generous you are. So don't stop that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Ayanda. Ayanda, until the next time, I would love to have you back on the show. This is not a one-time thing. This is the beginning of a little journey of your time on the show. So, sometime in
Sure.
the show is not going away anytime soon. It's not a pandemic, inspiration. This is something which I've wanted to start since August 2019.
Ah,
And this has been something which I've been keen to start since then. So this is really a platform for the long term. So I really want to thank you. But until the next time we chat, uh, stay safe, wear a mask, stay healthy, wash your hands, use sanitizer, Yeah, sure. I sound like I'm from the Department of Health.
I'm checking. Zwelim Kise. Thank you.
But thank you, Ayanda. Stay safe,
Sure.
keep well, and we'll speak soon.
Sure. Thanks, Tava. Cheers.
Yes.